Hello and welcome to the Spotlight Vancouver podcast. I am your host, Doug Varenas, licensed real estate agent in Washington and Oregon. Today on the show, I have my good friend, Nick Aufenkamp. He is a real estate agent and founder of DIY Homebuyer Academy, consultation service for buyers who want to go it alone without an agent. He provides consultative services for them, as well as full service real estate services. I think it's a really interesting conversation because we talk about changes in the real estate industry and how he is empowering home buyers to take charge of that process and save themselves a lot of money. So I think this is a really great episode just to inform yourself on what's going on in real estate and how the consumer is being empowered more and more, and just that you can buy a home by yourself. So I think this is really interesting, and I had a great conversation with Nick, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it.
Hey, everybody. Today, my guest on the show is Nick Aufenkamp. He is a real estate agent, an entrepreneur. He is the co-host of the Abundant Journey podcast and the founder of DIY Home Buying Academy, which is set to disrupt how people buy homes. And he's an all-around good guy, and I consider him a friend. Welcome to the show, Nick. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks so much, man. I consider you to be one of my greatest friends, especially in the real estate industry. I have loved getting to know you over the past couple of years and the number of times that we've gotten together. And so this feels like the most natural thing in the world, other than the microphones.
Yeah, we had some technical difficulties before we got started, and yes, we don't usually talk with microphones. But if you're a real estate agent, you're on social media quite a bit, so you're always sort of, I don't know. I feel like I get tired of myself sometimes. Like I'm just, it's part of having a business is putting yourself out there.
Yes.
But it's always a joy. I tell people that you're one of the people that's just a real day brightener. Just getting together and chatting is always just like, I always feel better and like more energized when we get together and talk. So I appreciate you for that. And I haven't had a guest in
a man. Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't had a guest in a while, so I'm hoping not to pounce on you too hard. Like I'm just excited to like be talking to somebody. It's been like a lot of solo episodes.
Yeah.
So I guess like I'd love to hear, like, we're gonna get into DIY Home Buying Academy because this is like it's pissing off a lot of people.
It is.
I wouldn't normally associate that with you. Like I don't think Nick Aufenkamp pisser offer of people. And so we're gonna get down to the bottom of why this is like kind of upsetting to people, especially other real estate agents. So for the record, think it's cool and think it's actually a net positive for the real estate industry and for realtors in general. I really do, because I feel like the more the consumer knows, the more they appreciate their own role in it. So like they have the information that they can take responsibility for their own stuff, but then they also appreciate what a realtor can do for them too. So I feel like it's a net gain. And again, we're going to get into that, but I wanted to kind of just get some background of how you got into real estate. And have you always been a rebel rouser?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think while all throughout kind of growing up and early adulthood, the most common description of, yeah, Nick, he's such a nice guy. But I do think that I have a strong contrarian streak that runs all the way through me. And I also, just the way that I look at the world, I always am asking why. Why do we do it this way? Is there a better way? Why did we establish things this? And I'm really struggle to just accept the status quo, which has made it difficult at times for employers to employ me or have me on there. So, the path of entrepreneurship and being my own business owner lends itself well to being somebody that's kind of always asking why and challenging the status quo. And so yes, the nice guy who can also be annoying with all of his questions and pushing for better, more efficient ways, more equitable ways of doing life and business. And the way that I got into real estate, I was living in Minnesota and was working in a totally different industry, but wanted to get into real estate investing and had a friend that was a realtor and investor. And so he helped us buy our first property, which we were able to convert a basement into an Airbnb. And then he helped us with buying a fix and flip. And just the more and more that I was talking about real estate investing and getting into it, the more I was also looking at the commissions that were going to him as the buyer's agent. And I just thought, wow, I'd really love to be able to do that myself and hopefully save some money that way. So I went and got licensed. And this was all around the time of COVID. I also had a career change, moved from Minnesota to Washington, and then took a job with a builder here in Clark County, New Tradition Homes, which I love New Tradition. Like I could just sing their praises for the whole rest of this episode if we wanted to pivot that direction, but I'll leave it at that for now. It was an amazing way to get introduced to the real estate industry, but also unique in that about half of the buyers that I dealt with did not have a buyer's agent, which is much more typical in new construction for a buyer to be unrepresented, as we call it within the real estate industry. So it was just after a few years with the builder that I decided, I'm going to expand my horizons a bit and decided to go out and start my own more traditional real estate business working as a broker. And so that's when I started what I call the Tartan team, which is an homage to my father-in-law. And then it's been in the last year that I've been the real estate agent gone rogue, who's now teaching people how to buy homes without a real estate agent. So that's broad brush strokes, like how everything has evolved, but it's been a good journey. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's certainly an evolution. Like it's going from the role of like an investor and then wanting to be more involved in that process, and now like seeing that shift that's happening in the industry and then adapting to it. I think that's really smart and forward thinking. And we had some conversations about that. The Sitzer versus Burnett lawsuit came up. I don't want to get into it too much, but basically it is decoupling the commissions from the listing agent and the buyer's agent. So technically buyers are responsible for paying that commission to their agent, although for the most part it's being negotiated with sellers for the most part. But DIY Homebuyer Academy is set to disrupt this system, and I want to hear more about how you came to that business model and what your thoughts are. And so maybe just give people an overview of like what DIY Homebuyer Academy is. I got my daughter in the background here. So yeah, tell us more about DIY Homebuyer Academy and like the process that you went involved to come to that business model, that service.
Yeah, most simply what the DIY Homebuyer Academy is it's I look at myself as an educator and empowerer of consumers. And so as much as I would like to take credit for inventing the self-represented or unrepresented buyer, believe it or not, I did not create that category. There were people that were buying homes without real estate agents long before I ever entered the scene. Some people will be shocked by that,
What?
especially some of the realtors that are in my comments on my short form posts that, you would think that I was creating a category that had never previously existed. That's not the case. There's always been a segment of homebuyers, albeit small, like 3 to 4% of all home buyers are self-represented by choice. But with the changes coming out of that lawsuit and settlement that you mentioned against NAR, buyers are now being confronted in a way that they weren't ever before with the cost of having a buyer's agent. And whether they're paying the buyer agent out of pocket or whether it's the seller paying it in a concession or a credit, that buyer agent is adding typically between 2 and 3% to the costs of the real estate transaction. And especially on some of these higher price point homes and $1.5, $2 million homes, I was talking with a guy the other day that was like, I'm buying a $2 million home. My buyer agent would be getting $60,000 in commission. I don't know that it's worth it. And that is a fair question for consumers to ask. What kind of services am I getting relative to the $60,000 that is going to my agent? So I just recognized pretty early on that this segment of unrepresented buyers is going to grow. more people are going to ask that value proposition, and they're going to look for alternatives. And then looking at what's available online to educate home buyers how to go through the home buying process themselves, I just found that there's like this huge void. Like if you go on YouTube, pretty much anything that's how to buy a home, the first point is, well, hire a good buyer's agent. And then it's kind of, here's what you look for in a good buyer's agent and all the things that they're going to do for you, which is great. Like I am still a buyer's agent. Like I still help people with buying homes, but just realizing, wow, there's a real opportunity to serve home buyers and make transactions better for the listing agents that are working with the unrepresented buyers if that consumer is educated. And even to your point earlier, I just think that an educated consumer is the best consumer, because even if they get educated and then decide, wow, this is way more than I want to take on, I am going to hire a buyer agent, they have a far greater appreciation of what their buyer agent is doing. And like you said, they're far more invested just in the process of buying a home. So I see it as wins all the way around. In practice, the way that this got started was I was helping some friends locally sell their home and then purchase another home. And they found the home that they wanted to buy on Airbnb, of all places. They were struggling to find it on market. I found an Airbnb that they loved. They reached out to the hosts through the Airbnb platform and asked if they'd be willing to sell. And the hosts or the owners of the property said, yes, but we don't want to involve any real estate agents. We don't want to pay any of those fees. And so I worked out an arrangement with these friends of mine to basically coach them through the home buying process at a very nominal fee. And that was kind of my experiment. Now, these are very entrepreneurial, competent sort of folks. It wasn't their first home that they were buying, but the process went so smooth. And that was, before I'd formalized DIY Homebuyer Academy, just experimenting with, can I coach somebody through this as an unrepresented buyer? And the answer at the end of that was, yes, I can. And because they were buying like a $1.3 million property, I mean, they saved over 30 grand in real estate commissions just on the buy side alone. And that felt really good. Like going to bed and being like, man, I saved my friends 30 grand. That's huge in terms of
Yeah.
creating value for somebody. So a lot of this for me is just motivated by the fact that there are already consumers wanting to represent themselves. I want to help them do that well and create a lot of value for folks in doing that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, to be honest, like I can see that sort of model where all agents, one, have to be able to express what their value proposition is. Like, what are they doing for that commission, as you mentioned? And I do feel like as you go up the price point, that fee based on percentage, I mean, if you get some pushback on that, I think that's fair. And so I do think these are all fair questions. And I can see a time when like all real estate agents will have that sort of what you're doing plus the traditional way of helping buyers and sellers like in their back pocket, where they can help you, guide you through the process, and also be more hands-on as needed, because as those consumers get more educated, they realize like, oh, I want to do this, I'm motivated, I have an interest in doing it myself, or like, wow, there's a lot involved in this transaction. I'm okay paying this fee to my agent because I know what I'm getting. I know the service they're providing, and I'm okay with that. I think there's a lot of people out there like that too. So really, you're just expanding that addressable market of people. And like you said, helping people who are already doing this or want to do this, but it's pissing a lot of agents off because it's threatening. Like you're saying you don't need them, and it's like coming after their bottom line and their livelihood and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, what are the comments? Like, what are the comments you've gotten? Like,
I mean, they range from just the utterly absurd to the utterly incorrect. It's funny because I set out to do home buyer education, and I feel like a third to sometimes half of what I'm doing is actually agent education. It's almost automatic that whenever I post a short form video on TikTok, I'm going to have some agent that comes into the comments and is like, I don't do dual agency. It's like, okay, like let me explain what the difference between dual agency and working with an unrepresented buyer is, because they're not the same. There's also a lot of listing agents that, well, they'll say, I can't show a home to an unrepresented buyer without having a buyer broker services agreement or a buyer agency agreement. That's the new rule and requirement. It's like, wait a second. No, even on NAR's own website, like a listing agent can always show their own listings to a so there's a lot of just correcting misconceptions that I think a lot of these agents are sincere, but they just don't know better. Now, that still scares me. I don't see that as an excuse, because these are people that are getting paid extremely well to help consumers handle some of the most significant financial transactions of their life. And so for agents to not know what the rules are, to not understand the differences between dual agency and working with a self-represented buyer, to forbid self-represented buyers access to their listings, like, I don't think there's any excuse for that. But I also I realize that some of these people are not malintentioned. But then there are the other segment of people that are commenting on my stuff where they see it as a huge threat, because they half the time they're buyer's agents. And if consumers are empowered to not have to use a buyer agent, then that dries up some of their pool of potential addressable market. It's an industry that just doesn't like change as it is. But most of the attacks that I get from those people are not based on any sort of rationale or reason. They're just personal attacks of, this Nick guy is an idiot. Don't ever listen to him. He's a failed agent that couldn't hang. And so therefore, those who can't do teach, kind of thing. And it's like, well, okay,
Right.
if
Just
that's the
trolls.
accusation.
Right. Just your standard garden variety troll on social media. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you know what? I find that, and throughout history, I'm sure you know this, like the people that take the most flack and get attacked for something, an idea that they have or a service they're providing, it means you're onto something, man. So I find that's an encouraging thing to see, is that you get those trolls and that just kind of fear. I want to be the lawsuit that Sitzer versus Burnett, the NAR lawsuit, has just caused a lot of confusion for everybody. And like you said, I don't think there's ill intent, but also, as you mentioned, like it's an industry that doesn't like change, likes obfuscation and keeping things kind of vague. And I really think we've kind of done it to ourselves, because we've been keeping consumers in the dark, and a lot of times the fee structures haven't been transparent, and it's created a climate where we're perceived lower than used car salesmen. Like real estate agents are perceived by the consumer like the lowest of the low.
Yeah.
The sleaziest.
Right.
Which is unfortunate.
It is. It's there's so many reasons, I think, for that. Part of it is just that the standards and barriers to entry to become a real estate agent are so low. You need like 10 times the hours and supervised training to become a beautician or a hairstylist in Washington State than you do to become a real estate agent. And it's like your hair grows back in 3 weeks, like if you get a bad haircut. But like if you buy the wrong home or get bad advice from an agent, so there's so little oversight. And now there are really, really good agents that really can justify their value to sellers and to buyers. And I have no problem with any of those people. That's not who I'm trying to pick beef with. And also, those are not the people who are concerned about me and DIY Homebuyer Academy, because they know, they're confident in the value that they provide. So it's usually the people that they're very casual about real estate. They look at it as more of a side hustle, an easy way to bring in an extra $40,000 to $60,000 a year, and they're the ones that are really feeling threatened. And I think that's a good thing for the industry and for consumers on the whole. We kind of need to see a mass exodus of the casual agents, which is not to say that like every agent needs to be full-time dedicated, like that there isn't a category for incredible agents who also have other jobs and roles. But it's just to say that it's like the Aunt Susie who counts on 3 transactions a year from her nieces, nephews, and grandchildren. She might be a lovely lady, but if she's not doesn't really understand what's happening in the market and is only being used by the friends and family, most likely those people are getting underserved relative to how much she's getting compensated for those transactions.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. There is a huge disparity in competency with agents. And I think for agents these days, consumers are savvy and you really need to explain your value proposition and what you bring to the table as an agent because there's going to be more options. And as consumers get more educated, they're going to be asking like, well, what do you do? Like, what am I paying you for? Like, what are the services that you're providing? And so agents who can't articulate that are going to be left behind. And we're seeing that already. Like a lot of casual agents dropped off when things got slower last couple of years.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I really think like as you mentioned, like the educated consumer is someone who can make those who's going to value the services of an agent more when they've gone through the process themselves. And those people are motivated anyway. Like you said, they're probably have some real estate experience or are kind of just DIYers in general, and they can kind of do it themselves, but they do need that guidance, as you mentioned. And so, I just see a time when all agents will probably provide that kind of different levels of service, like the coaching model, and then they'll also have the full service model. It'll be a spectrum of service. I can definitely see that, and you're kind of at the forefront of that.
Yeah. I'm excited about what this time and the regulatory changes that were brought on by the settlement. I think that there's going to be more lawsuits, and I wouldn't be surprised if the DOJ steps in because, sort of like you had alluded to earlier, the point of the lawsuit was to really decouple listing agent and buyer agent commissions and to have each party negotiate those separately. It took all of about 5 minutes for savvy agents to find loopholes and workarounds, and functionally today in the market, it's still, I'm making up statistics, but it feels like, 95% of sellers are still expecting to pay the buyer agent's compensation. And I think that the DOJ will likely remove like cooperative compensation entirely and some of those things, which I think is in the interest of consumers. Without getting too into the weeds there, all of this disruption does create an opportunity for agents to really think about their business model. And that was one of the other big things when I think about traditional buyer agency. Buyers are concerned about the misalignment of incentive structure between them and their agent. And that is a really legitimate concern because as much as like I consider myself, you, the agents that are in our sort of circle to be really ethical people and can set aside like our financial gain for the good of our clients, there is a odd dynamic that I think we all just need to be honest about, that when I'm getting paid a percentage of the final purchase price and when I only get paid if that home closes, it creates a financial incentive structure for me for the buyer to spend as much as possible and to close as quickly as possible. And anytime that I help them negotiate a price down, I'm working against my paycheck. And anytime that I advise them to pass on a house or to walk away from a deal, I'm delaying my paycheck. Now, good agents will make all the arguments, and I agree with them of that it's like, and I will gladly do that because that's what good service to my client is, and that's what generates referrals. And so, sure, like in the short term, I might be leaving money on the table or taking longer to get a deal done, but it'll pay for itself in the future. Good buyer agents think that way. But when you have agents that are sometimes as desperate as they are right now, when the market is slow and sales are hard to come by, there are real human nature dynamics that I think we would be foolish to just close our eyes and cover our ears and pretend that they aren't there. And consumers are waking up to that as well. And so I just think it's a cool time for agents and the industry on the whole to really be thinking through, all right, how do we create better alignment of incentive structures? How do we really make sure that the consumer is looked after and make sure that agents are getting fairly compensated for their work? Because that sucks if you're spending 4 or 5 months showing house after house after house, and then the buyer's like, you know what, I'm going to wait, or I'm going to move across the country, and you've just spent all of that time, all of those hours, and you don't see a dime from it as an agent. So just the whole model, going back to being the rabble rouser of asking why, it's just kind of like, huh, This whole model seems flawed, and like I got to punish the buyers that move forward with extra high commissions to compensate myself for all the people that never do move forward on a home. I don't know what
Right.
your
Yeah.
thoughts are on any of that, but
No, I totally agree. It's easy to say you provide good service and that you will can a deal because it doesn't work out for your clients, or you will tell them it's just not the right time to buy. I've done both of these. Like currently, actually, I have told my client to walk on a 130-year-old home with some foundation issues, and I'm just like, I'm not sure this is right. And this is like almost $1 million sale, and I do have that mindset, but I also aren't. I'm not relying on that commission to like feed my children. And
yeah.
so if you're really grinding and you're really depending on that commission to like buy some groceries that night, then
Mm-hmm.
you are gonna twist yourself into like a moral pretzel to make that deal happen, possibly against your client's best interest. That is understandable under the current incentives. So I totally agree. Yeah, from my perspective, yes, I've told people like it doesn't seem like this is the right time to buy. I think renting is probably the best for you right now. And so I lost that I lost that commission. And then, this person I'm telling to like walk away. We're still working on it. And yeah, my mindset is like I'm going to 5x whatever I earn on this commission because they're going to realize like this is somebody who has my best interest in mind. I'm going to tell everybody about him. So I'm making a long-term investment like you mentioned, but if my situation was different, it's easy to like subconsciously maybe not do the right thing, and that is because of the way the financial incentives are set up currently. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't think you know what it's going to look like, but it's changing, and I'm hoping that it's changing for the better for the consumer. I don't know about currently. It just seems more confusing, but
Yeah.
we've had a lot of discussions about this, and I think ultimately it's going to take a while to kind of hash out. But I'm hoping the consumer is going to win because there's just so much more information out there now,
Yeah.
and the consumers are savvy and they're going to kind of figure it out. And once people start asking questions, and that was the impetus for this lawsuit. Like someone just said, "Hey, why am I paying the buyer's agent to bid against me? And
Right.
what's up with that?" And so it kind of led down this rabbit hole, but we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, yeah, interesting days ahead, and not to turn this into an AI podcast by any means, but the disruption of AI, like it's right there on the horizon, and it's
Hmm.
fundamentally, I think, going to change how consumers are evaluating properties, how we do CMAs, even when it comes to contracts. The being able to put together contracts. I've been talking with different developers and people that are creating some pretty awesome projects. And so I think smart agents are looking around the corner at what is to come and trying to prepare for that. I believe that real estate, especially residential real estate, is such a relational business that I don't think that AI will entirely replace agents at any point. And that's also part of why I've set up the DIY Homebuyer Academy the way that I have, where it's very human to human, community centric, live education kind of stuff, because I think that something gets lost when it's just like, have the computer find your property, write up your contract, do your negotiations. Like, I don't foresee that going well, but those are definitely things that are on the horizon that the agents need to at least be thinking about and kind of have a game plan for, or else I do think it's going to be a harsh reckoning for many folks in the near future.
Yeah. I mean, they literally call them AI agents. They're, like a chat bot, and there's going to be more and more. There's a misconception that AI thinks for itself, and it doesn't. I mean, it's based on prompts and the information it gets. So we're not quite to the point where they're going to be able to like negotiate or, do those kind of on the fly thinking. But yeah, at some point, I mean, that's in the future. But yeah, they're literally called agents. So
Yeah.
AI agents. And yeah, we'll see how that works out because there is a considerable amount of emotion that goes into it. So I agree. Like I don't think agents are going to be totally cut out, and AI is going to be a tool that's going to help them and consumers. But yeah, it's so emotional, and I realize that more and more that your AI agent's not going to talk you off a cliff or kind of give you that encouragement when you need it, or that, there's other components to the home buying
Right.
and selling process. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what does it look like when people come into DIY home buyer? Like what does that process look like for the consumer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most of everything that I'm doing right now is free, which is not a very sustainable business model. I am losing money every month on, on what I'm doing with hosting fees and the amount of time. But that's okay because, like you said, I'm kind of early, and for many people, just creating the category of asking the question, can I represent myself? Like, what goes into that? And so most of the free materials that I've created are trying to help people answer that. The number one place that I encourage people to join is I have a school community for DIY home buyers. So that's free to join. There's a essentials course there that I've had about 40 people that have gone through it now. It's about 4.5 hours of content with some downloadable worksheets and checklists that really just go through the fundamentals of from pre-approval or financial preparation all the way through escrow and closing. What are the fundamental steps involved in the home buying process? And that's enough to get people probably 85% of the way, and for them to really determine, yep, DIY, self-represented home buying is for me, or nope, I don't want to take on this risk. Then the community element is cool because that's where we're able to, if there's news articles or live issues that people are running into, they're able to ask questions of the whole community, share their experiences, share feedback that they've gotten as they've gone to open houses and talked with listing agents. We do a weekly happy hour call in there for kind of Q&A and just touching base. So that's like that's everything that's just, and it's a lot that's available
Yeah.
to anybody and everybody for free. I don't know that it'll be free forever, but it's been a good way to just establish trust, and for me to also be able to get more and more data about what home buyers across the United States. This isn't just Washington, though surprisingly there've been a number of folks from Washington in there. But for me to just really get a feel for, okay, here's the issues that self-represented buyers are running into. And then the next level of service is one-on-one coaching. And I just do that as a subscription model. It ranges depending on what somebody's needs are between like 700 and $1,000 a month. But it's just hey, you have unlimited access to me. I won't be there to tour homes with you or to attend your home inspection, but I am there to review your inspection report, help you set up your housing search, look over CMAs, talk you through negotiation strategies. I make it very clear that I'm not your agent when we're doing this coaching setup. Like I'm your educator, and I'm also not a real estate attorney. And so a lot of the folks that have done the DIY homebuyer path will work with me for all of the like negotiation strategy stuff, looking at different reports, just kind of making sure that they've got somebody in their corner warning them about what they don't know. But they may employ the help of a real estate attorney simply for the contract and contingencies, and to make sure that that's airtight and that they have some legal backing. And that, I think, is the best of both worlds. And usually you can hire a real estate attorney to draft up a purchase and sale agreement for $400 or $500. So between, say you work with me one-on-one for 3 months and you hire a real estate attorney, you're looking at somewhere in the ballpark of $3,500 compared to, on a $500,000 house, a $15,000 commission that might go to a buyer's agent. And again, it just, the question to the consumer is, what's it worth to you, the relative value? And there've been a handful of folks now that have said, yeah, I'll go the coaching route. And that's been really, really sweet.
Yeah, great. That's a ton of value. And again, there's plenty of room for, I'm sure you get a lot of people who also are like, wow, this is a lot, or I don't want to take the legal risk, or, and they want to use an agent. So it's really sort of an a la carte experience that provides them with the best tools to get what they want. So, I mean, how can you argue with that? Sounds like a wonderful service and for DIY buyers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It definitely has been very cool to build, and for those that that check it out and then decide, yeah, I don't want to do it. That's also been great where I've been able to form such great relationships with agents like yourself, where I have kind of this trusted network that continues to grow, a trusted network of agents really across the country, where I'm able to give names of, hey, okay, you don't want to do it yourself, but hey, here's somebody that I think you really will enjoy working with and that I know will keep your best interests at heart. And so being able to take the trust that I've been able to establish with some of these folks through just the DIY homebuyer platform and be able to help connect them, is just another way of being able to create more value for folks, which again, I hope that serves the industry, and I hope to bring more business to good agents like yourself versus just sending people back out into the wild of, I hope you find a good one.
Right. Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, we can talk about this forever, but I know you got things to do. Where can people find you? How can they get in touch with you and work with you, whether that be consultating or as a real estate agent?
Yeah, thanks. Well, if you're local, I would say work with Doug. Unless unless there was something I said where you're like, I gotta,
Shameless plug.
yeah, you'll be served even better, I'm sure, by working with Doug. But if you are thinking about the DIY route, the best way to get connected is going to that school group. So that's skool.com/DIY homebuyer. If you're not quite ready to join a free group, I know for some people, if another platform and having to give my email, if that's not you, just on YouTube, you can find me at DIY Homebuyer. Similar with, I think I'm at DIY Homebuyer on TikTok and Instagram. If you like more of the short form quick hits and want to read some crazy comments from agents, pretty much anywhere, just at DIY Homebuyer. Except for DIYhomebuyer.com. Somebody else got that before me. So it's DIYhomebuyeracademy.com if you want the website. Anyhow. So yeah, you can find me most places online.
Yeah, that's everywhere. And I'll have links to this in the description so you can check it out. Nick Aufenkamp, it's always a pleasure. I love talking with you. I love what you're doing. Best of luck, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks for stopping by the show.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate you, man.
You too.